This is your Daily Mix. The following segment is sponsored by...
Good morning and welcome to the Daily Mix. I'm Rhonda McCullough. Today we're going to be discussing suicide prevention, particularly youth suicide prevention. Dr. Jeff Morawski, he's the Chief Medical Officer at SilverSummitHealthPlan, is here to discuss how loved ones can spot signs and where to seek help. Good morning, Doctor. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you to talk about this important topic.
What do we need to know about youth prevention and suicide?
I think the most important thing people need to understand is that for the 15 to 24 age group, suicide is the second leading cause of death right behind traumatic injury. So this is not a small problem. And I think that's the start there. And there are special groups of youth that are typically a little more disenfranchised. People who suffer from food insecurity or suffer with poverty or are LGBTQX or have joined the military are at even higher risk than that. It actually can pass trauma in some cases. So this is a really common issue that really through recognition is where the help really comes from.
How has the pandemic impacted youth suicide?
Oh my goodness, right? We all look back at being a teenager and that was not easy. Middle school, high school, when you went to school. But you had all the social supports of being there. There was a consistency in what you did. The pandemic really disrupted the social environment that our children learn and grow in. And so by taking that away, it increased the stress and stressors on them, and it increased our suicide rates. A really good example is in Clark County, where they've published some numbers for Nevada, good to look at. They've seen the number of suicides in a typical year double from what it usually is in a non-pandemic year. So we know that stress made a big difference.
What are the warning signs?
Yeah, it is really tough, right? The first thing is just to ask the question, how are you? Are you okay? And the second thing is to take the typical teenage answer, which is fine, and not accept it because, that's not telling you. So you have to ask, right? How are you feeling? How are things going? And you can be as direct or indirect as you like, but really fundamentally, people wishing they were dead is always something you have to be concerned about. Wishing that they weren't around anymore. I'm a burden on everyone. People that articulate that, people looking for methods. Actually, it's unfortunate, but a lot of times when they go back and look at the computers of youth who've acted on their suicide, whether they've completed it or not, they'll find searches for how to commit suicide. Everyone searches for everything. Increases or changes or new substance use disorders are a key to mental health illness. If your child or your friend's child or your neighbor's kid or the kid around the corner, wasn't someone who you thought was drinking or smoking or using drugs, and now all of a sudden that started, they are at much higher risk for suicide just because they've started that. And then really, really being anxious or really, really, really being sad. Anything at the extreme is something that you'll do in terms of, and also with isolation. So if you look for those things, they help. There's something called the Columbia Lighthouse Screening. It's 6 questions. They're very specific. You can Google it, Columbia Lighthouse Screening. And about 6 different ways or 10 different ways to do it will come up. And they're just simple questions that you can kind of work into a conversation to see if someone's at added risk.
Well, how can someone help a child that is struggling? Where do they go? Where do they seek help?
It's, I think one of the things is there's many, many options. So an easy one is your school. The school districts have great resources and you can reach out if they're in school to kind of say, hey, I think this is happening. Can you validate? Can you double check? Can you talk and help? If you really think you have a crisis and you need to talk to someone right now, 1-800-273-TALK or 8255, that's the National Suicide Hotline. And you can ask the person who's feeling suicidal to call and you can sit with them, or you can call yourself and say, hey, I this loved one, this neighbor, this friend, I'm concerned about them. What can I do to get help? And they'll also walk you through those processes. And there's, your pastors and your clergies and your medical doctors and mental health professionals, reaching out to anyone to really help connect someone to the resources they need. Just if you want to know more about Silver Summit Health Plan, you can check us out on www.silversummithealthplan.com. We do marketplace and Medicaid and Medicare plans, and the marketplace is open again until May 15th for if your circumstances change and you need to buy Obamacare. So take a look.
Thank you so much for joining us today for this important topic. We really appreciate your time, Doctor.
Thank you.
This segment was sponsored by